All right, I'll skip the introduction now. I don't have my notes readily available, but we'll see if we manage. All right, so my name is Emil, and I'm here to present our work on evaluation of a virtual reality tandem bike Exergame for rehabilitation. And it's a joint effort between Flinders University, Aalborg University, and Frederiksberg Municipality, and my lab, Multisensory Experience Lab in Denmark. And as a part of my PhD, I've been exploring how to develop these applications for physical therapy to see how, in what degree we can use it to motivate patients. So my first naive understanding of motivation was this quantified measure that we could just apply, and then we would have some profit in the end. But after a little bit of immersement into the real world, and a little bit of perusal of self-determination theory, we found out that about this meta-psychological view on motivation that involves the different psychological needs, and that these needs needs to be equally fulfilled in order to instill this motivation in individuals through that will then in turn be able to get these individuals to experience a sense of well-being, intrinsic motivation, and self-efficacy. And these basic psychological needs that the SDC researchers talk about is autonomy, the sense of having a sense of volition in what you're doing, the task that you're performing, a competence, feeling a sense of competence in the task that you're doing, and then in turn relatedness, which is the sort of the interpersonal dimension that introduced what is the connection to other people and in those activities. And when you have those need supports, that is what create the foundation for well-being and motivation, which is needed in order to succeed in a rehabilitation context. But when we look broadly on the field of social VR, it's very limited. There isn't a lot to go after, especially not in the immersive domain. And that is, of course, a problem because there's a lot of things we don't know about how to apply this in this new domain for elderly participants. What are the design criteria we have to abide by in order to make a good game that can motivate activity? For the ones that have been used, there has been a tendency to have a focus on competition. And that makes sense because the non-immersive prototypes that have been used, the Nintendo Wii, these types of game styles are often embedded into the framework. That's the golfing, the boxing prototypes. Except for a few articles that I found, probably more as well, that try to explore these different game modes. So, in terms of competition, can that be perceived as a need for the elderly patient? What we heard again repeatedly from patients in Denmark and also in Australia was that they simply weren't interested in participating in anything that had involved competition. They weren't interested. They were more interested in having that social experience, just socializing in a non-competitive way. And that's sort of backed up by a study from 2012 illustrating that competitiveness tends to increase during the lifespan, and then when you reach the age of 50, it tends to decrease again. And that has ramifications for the type of game that we design. Another problem with competition is that individual differences are amplified. So if we want to succeed with the game design, we have to consider to what degree do we actually cheat the system. I mean, because the patients will come from different functional backgrounds. They will have different levels of capacity. So we have to, in a non-overt way, we have to design this game so it doesn't manipulate. Or we can try some other design methods. Another problem with competition is that it has a tendency to lead to stress and aggressiveness. In the two articles here, in the first study, they found that the competition had a tendency to increase in-game violence and foul language among participants. as opposed to collaborative or cooperative game styles. And in other paper, the effect of a cooperative game sort of flooded outside the study, because they had a little post-study experiment where the other member put up a pencil, and then you had a tendency to see that if the co-actors they played together, they were more inclined to actually help each other subsequently as well. That means that we have both in-game behavior changes, we also have behavior changes after the game has been played, which I think is pretty important. And with those things in mind, we set out to develop this body biking system. And what we wanted to know specifically was how does the user experience a collaborative environment, get the feedback on it. Is the joint effort perceived as hampering or aiding performance? Does the user experience any side effects? And can the appearance of a virtual hill increase cadence? Since we could not manipulate with the bike, the exercise bike, but we could manipulate with the perceived speed. So what we did when we had a hill, we turned down the speed to see if they would actually compensate and increase their cadence. And it was developed in Unity, and we made a custom-built sensor. But as with all prototypes, the real problem started with the networking part. I really wish I could play this. Probably I could, like this. Because that's sort of a Pandora box when you start to interfacing two computers. It becomes really a hassle. As one person online said, what you're trying to achieve is one of the most complex things in networking. So great. With that in mind, we set out to solve it with interpolation. And it got a little bit better, just predicting based on the current cadence, where would the next position be. But we still weren't quite satisfied because there was still a little bit of jittery. But what we noticed was that this jittery or this lag was only based around the host. So what we did was just put the host in the back, and the one in front could not see any lag. So that was a cheap solution that works on a tandem bike, not on any other conditions. So just a quick demonstration of what the final scene looked like. This is from the first, the person seated in the front. And then you had both auditory and visual feedback in the slow down of the speed and the rich environment, the eagles. Right, so methods. We performed a mixed methods user study in an outpatient ward in Australia. We screened 37 potential patients, and finally 8 patients agreed to participate. 1 dropped out. 3 members joined their respective partners. If they didn't have a partner, they were set up with a member of the research team. We ended up with 11 participants, 7 males, and 60 years plus minus, so maybe not exactly elderly adults. Although some of you might take offense. So before the start, we had the consent form, the interview, demographic questionnaire. We did a baseline VR sickness questionnaire to measure the change scores. Then during the test, we measured the interpersonal dialogue, interaction that went on between them in the system itself. Unity logged the cadence and the virtual slope of the hills. And the post-test, we measured the SSQ again. Then we used the virtual embodiment questionnaire to tap into the experience of the sense of embodiment, the intrinsic motivation inventory, usability, and semi-structured interview. So the test was closely managed before COVID hit, so that was quite lucky when I managed to wrap it up. So in terms of motivation, both of them were high, but what we noticed was that there was a difference between participants located in the front versus in the back, where it was higher in the front where they can actually see the participant in front of them, which is quite interesting. In terms of embodiment, there was a high sense of embodiment and agency, a low sense of altered body schema, which was quite interesting because the only virtual avatar was a floating bicycle helmet. So the social interaction was vivid talking. It was both balanced. It was a positive valence. They talked about good things they explored or noticed in the environment. And the mood was overall good, except for the one participant that dropped out, tended to be more negative. So in terms of VR sickness, it was okay along the subscales, and the total score was also fine. Usually it has to be under 20, but that's sort of for military simulators and not specifically for immersive virtual reality, so I think we can get away with a little bit more. But one thing that was proved to be a problem was this excessive sweating, because one of the items of the SSQ measures the sweating as an early onset of nausea. So that's a problem that can confound the measure. So what we did was to sort of just retain that score at the baseline level to detect how that would look like. And you can see the modified post-adjusted score over here. Okay, so in terms of the OLS regression, we ran with the cadence versus slope. There was a the intercept y-axis is just the slope when there's no slope on the hill, just going straight ahead. There was a significant effect on the virtual slope, 0.43 RPM increase per 1 degree increase. And in terms of predictors, we could say that age and sex explain some of the variations in the data. Participant statements. One participant remarked that you're more or less, other people are around, but you don't interact with them. Whereas this here, the body biking system, you're working together as a team, sort of bringing in the context of the existing therapy to explain how this could be used in a novel way. In terms of the competitiveness, another participant remarked that I don't have a competitive bone in my body, so it wouldn't interest me when asked, would you rather engage in a competitive play style? So one of the other remarked that, so I did 6 kilometers, and I was surprised because I can only do 4. So that sort of speaks about the sense of competence that you can go beyond what you thought you were capable of, which I think is very important, that you can actually show this to the patients, and that they're capable of much more than they think they are. To sum up, there was a high motivation, low VR sickness score, but sweat was a confounder. Front seat placement led to more side effects. There was a positive interpersonal interaction going on between the participants. When we asked them about their sense of how much time they've spent in it, they had a tendency to underestimate the length of this training. So this time compression effect that they actually thought they'd been biking for much longer than they actually had, or vice versa. So there was a need for better avatar representation, that they remarked that they sort of felt disconnected from the bike, likely because they only had this floating bicycle helmet to facilitate their virtual presence. So if you want to know more, we just published this journal article in the special issue. So feel free to browse that, of course. Shameless self-promotion as well. Thank you for your time. How was that? Perfect. And we'll take questions in the end.
Thank you very much, Emil.